morning or good evening or whatever time of day it is to everyone. I'd like to say my name is Anwar Bilal Kente, and I am a native Chicagoan. I grew up on the west side of Chicago and dwelled there until I went to college. When I went to college at DePaul University, I am a graduate of DePaul. I moved to the south side neighborhood of Inglewood. So if you're from Chicago, you're familiar with those neighborhoods. So I grew up on the west side, Lawndale, North Lawndale, Rockwell, and then I moved to Inglewood. And I'm a native Chicagoan, as I said. Again, I went to school here and graduated. And there's some other things that have happened, but we're not here to talk about that today. But as pertaining to the topic today, I was introduced to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam as a teenager. And from that point on, I have been active in one degree or another with the Nation of Islam or with Islam or with the Black community in general. I would say I really started my political activities back when Harold Washington became mayor. And I was a volunteer in Harold Washington's campaign. So I got exposed to community organizing. I know you all have heard of Barack Obama was a community organizer. Well, I was also in that field, and I grew up among the likes of the great Lou Palmer and Eddie Reed and R. Eugene Pensum, prominent Black attorney Steve Copley, people like that, and obviously Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I didn't want to let this time pass, the 25-year anniversary since the Million Man March, and not have some type of record or something to say about that.
Well, I'm glad that we get to do this on video as a way to pay respects to this important event. So actually, I had not heard of it until you brought it to my attention. So I'm sure maybe there's other people who don't know what it is either. So can you tell me what the Million Man March was exactly?
Well, the idea for the Million Man March came about in the mid-'80s. Minister Farrakhan at that time was very actively touring the country by motorcade, by bus. I don't think he took the planes much, but he was almost, I don't want to call him a traveling rock star, but that's basically how he was traveling. I remember accompanying him to cities such as St. Louis, Memphis, Detroit, I believe Nebraska, Virginia, New York, Florida, California, Phoenix, you name it. He was on this tour called Stop the Killing. And during that time, he came up with an idea about taking a great amount of Black men to Washington, somewhat as a protest, but somewhat as a stand to really possibly put a demand on the government, but also to show that we have things that we're responsible for as men, as Black men. So in the course of his speech, he said, I envision having 1 million Black men in Washington, D.C. And when he said it, he really was not intending to say 1 million, but after he had said it, he basically said, I got to stand on that. So that's where the name of the Million Man March came from. And the purpose of the Million Man March, which was inspired by Minister Louis Farrakhan, was like a demonstration, a stand, a declaration of an intention to atone for our failures as men in the community, things that we should have been doing, we were not doing as relates to how we were dealing with our families and taking care of our communities and our women and our children and such. So that was partially what the march was, and it was called a march, was really like more of a rally, a demonstration, and a stand, really to really show the world that black man is not what they say we are, which is mostly in the media portrayed as something negative.
Can you tell me what that symbol is in front of you?
Yes. This emblem, or this insignia, if you will, was designed by my brother, Minister Gerald Scanias. Minister Gerald Scanias is a non-denominational Christian minister, and I actually am talking to you now from his church building, which is called the River Jordan Ministries. And he designed this again back in 1995, around that time. And if you look at it, you will see that you have the colors of the red, black, and green, which are the colors of the Black Liberation Flag, red, black, and green. You have the number 1 million in the center, of course, related to the Million Man March. But also you have the different symbols, religious symbols of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. So what this is saying is black liberation, but it's a million, but it's men of all faiths. Mm-hmm. It's not one faith, it's all faiths, all groups, all community organizations, political persuasions, what have you, all unified under the umbrella or the mothership, if you will, because notice it's in an oval shape, mm-hmm. which also represents the mothership. That 1 million is a unity of all those different, identification. And it says, to God be the glory. Yeah. To God be the glory. And mm-hmm. I remember one thing Minister Farrakhan said that the day after the march, and he addressed this to the media, he said, will you give God the glory? You see this gathering, 1 million, almost 2 million men there, peaceful. They were thinking, all these black men are coming here, they're going to tear down the city, it's going to be some riot. No, it was one of the most peaceful demonstrations ever. No arrests, no fighting, nothing, just brotherhood, people hugging, people sharing, talking to each other, fellowshipping. And that's not the image of black men that usually is portrayed.
Can you tell me about your hat and what the symbol is? It FOI?
I'm glad to do that. I was a member of the FOI, which is stand for the Fruit of Islam. Okay. The Fruit of Islam is the name given to the military training of the men who belong to Islam in North America. That's literally what the Fruit of Islam means. The fruit is the best. The fruit kind of represents the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth. Mm. It's kind of related to that. Yeah. And this was one of the uniforms that they had at the time. I rarely have worn it. Matter of fact, I have not touched this uniform to wear it since before the march. So I just thought it appropriate that since I had this uniform, I said, let me wear it, So, and then you see WFM, which stands for Wallace Farad Muhammad, who was known as the founder or the person who God sent to the black man to establish Islam here in North America.
You said this was in 1995, correct?
1995.
1995, okay. And was there anything in particular, politically, that ignited this march to happen? Does that make sense, that question?
Right, I know what you're saying. No, I don't think it was one particular incident. I think it's been the accumulation of 440 years of the black man's oppression in this country, or in this area of the earth. The first black men that we know of that were brought here by the slave trader John Hawkins. I don't know if you heard that name, John Hawkins, but he brought his ship, which was called Jesus, by the way, to Virginia in 1555. So 1995 actually represented 440 years of oppression since our sojourn, since we were brought here to the shores of North America. 440 years. There's also a significance to the 440, but we probably won't get into that. But it happened to coincide with that. As I remember, it was about a year after the O.J. Simpson verdict. That was part of it that was going on right then. President Bill Clinton was in office. Like I said, it's an accumulation just of the work of the Nation of Islam as taught by Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his spokesman, Minister Louis Farrakhan. So it's just a natural progression of Minister Farrakhan's theme of, brother, stop the killing. Politics without economics is symbol without substance. So it was right in line with that.
So can you tell me about how you initially became involved with the Million Man March?
At the time of the Million Man March, I was actually a registered follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a registered member of the Nation of Islam. I actually obtained my X. You heard of Malcolm X. I actually was Anwar X, but at the time, when you realize the X was in, the reason why we were given the name X is because we black people did not know what our real forefathers' names were when we were brought here from Africa. So the X, so like I said, Malcolm X, even though we know his last name was Little, he took on the X, which meant the unknown. He didn't know what his real forefathers' names were. So at the time, I was a registered follower. So I was already, obviously, Minister Farrakhan had this vision and spearheaded this and was the main organizer and convener. And he's the one that called the 1 million men to come to Washington, D.C. for this demonstration. And there's no one else in the world besides Minister Louis Farrakhan who could have done that. No one else. So it wasn't that he made the call, but God made the call for those million black men to come through him. And it should be understood that it was called, but they were called there by God. And it just happened to come through Minister Louis Farrakhan. So again, I was in the Nation of Islam, and I also was politically astute and active at that time with people such as Lou Palmer, Conrad World, the Black United Front, Steve Coakley, people like that. So I was already used to community organizing. So it was a natural progression for me to join the Million Man March local organizing committee. So I was on that committee. And our main head of that, the president, if you will, was the Reverend Al Sampson. Reverend Sampson is the pastor of Fernwood United Methodist Church, which is located on the south side of Chicago. But what is so distinctive about Reverend Al Sampson is he is one of only 2 men who were personally ordained into the ministry by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was only one of 2 people who was ordained personally by Dr. King. So he brought that gravitas to the organization and that background.
So a lot of very important figures and a lot of people who were influenced and also mentored by really influential figures.
Yes, mentored by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Minister Louis Farrakhan, of course, was involved with it as spearheaded, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the local political leaders in the Black Liberation Movement.
So can you tell me about your experience walking in the Million Man March? The kind of things that you felt and like the empowerment and different interactions you had with people?
Yes, I can just say that since we started the organization, I mean, the power or that feeling started even long before we even got to Washington. Because we had the local organizing committees all over the country who were knocking on doors, passing out flyers, selling newspapers, making phone calls, telling their family and friends about it. I remember a distinct memory around that time. I don't know if you ever heard of this group called the Grateful Dead. There's a rock group called the Grateful Dead.
Mhm.
At that time, during that summer, the Grateful Dead happened to be in Chicago. And I remember distributing flyers and selling newspapers near the Lakeshore Drive. And, you know, the people that follow the Grateful Dead around, they're called Deadheads.
Yeah.
So I actually encountered some Deadheads while I was out there promoting the Million Man March. But there was also the journey of the men, of the people who went there by their own car. Many thousands went by bus. Many went by airplane. I actually flew there by airplane. And during that journey on the road, especially at every rest stop, there was always a great number of men who were on their way to the march. So people got a chance to talk to, you know, hey, brother, how you doing? And you on your way to the march? And yeah, brother, how'd you hear about it? You know, so there was a lot of camaraderie and brotherhood and fellowship there, and that spirit of unity and togetherness that was fostered just on the way to the march physically. So I would say, you know, it started long before getting to the city itself. Matter of fact, when I arrived there, and of course I flew, and fortunately I was able to stay with a relative there. So I didn't have to worry about any place to stay. It was very convenient. I was just able to get on the public transportation and go right to the mall. But I remember first arriving there, and I saw Brother Conrad Worrell, who recently passed away a couple months ago. He was the head of the Black United Front, one of the black political and black liberation activists there. I remember on that particular day, I got there very early. I mean, there was hardly nobody on the mall. I believe I got there maybe 7 in the morning or something, very early. So I was there early enough to be able to stand pretty close to the stage. I was pretty close to the stage, right in the center. And again, it was just the feeling of looking around and seeing the hundreds and the thousands and the tens of thousands and the crowd building. And I know all these people are here for this purpose, to come and make this demonstration, to make this stand and make this declaration. And I know that probably a great percentage of them, 80, 90% of them, had no intention or no inclinations to even go to Washington, D.C. for anything. But they were there, and of course I was there for this purpose, you know, to make a stand, you know, as black men.
I can't believe that I literally had not heard of it. And it sounds like it was really monumental, the amount of people that came together to really make a statement to show like the unity in the black community, as opposed to, like you said, like what people always see in the media and how the black male in America is portrayed.
Yes, and that was by design. I mean, there were most of the mainstream or lamestream media, whatever you want to call them, were not in support of this march. They tried to ignore it. They discouraged people from coming, especially tried to discourage black men from coming. And I just want to relate this, Minister Farrakhan talked about Willie Lynch. I don't know if you heard of Willie Lynch, but he was a slave master back in Virginia. I don't know if it was Jamestown, but I believe he wrote a letter, I believe it was 1612, if I'm not mistaken, that he wrote a letter addressed to the slave owners at that time. And what he basically did was wrote a blueprint that said, fellow slave owners, if you follow this recipe. You'll be able to enslave the black man and keep him under your control for 300 years. And what his main thrust was, you know, there are natural differences between groups and within groups. What Willie Lynch did, what his emphasis was, is to make those differences larger. So his idea was pit the old against the young, the old black man versus the young black man, the male against the female, the uneducated versus the educated, the house Negro versus the field Negro. You may have heard that. And this is what still the media is still doing, that has done that today, even as recently as the most recent election, which I'm not even talking about that, but trying to cause division and dissension within the black community, in that particular case, over a political campaign. But that was just something in general that was used for control of the black man, to raise those dissensions, to have us fighting each other instead of cooperating. And again, it was by design that you didn't know about this. 25, just think, 25, this is the 25th year anniversary of the largest human gathering in the history of the United States, maybe even the world. And some people tried to come behind the Million Man March and copy and duplicate what Mr. Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam did. They were sadly not successful. The media even ignored it. This just happened October 16th, which is not even a month ago, the 25th anniversary, and you heard nothing?
I know, I didn't hear anything. Only for
That's by design.
Wow. So what impact do you believe that the march made on American society and the black community?
I believe that, quiet as it's kept, and there's a lot of people that you may know, famous people, that were at that march, and based on what they heard and saw and felt there when they attended, they did actually go back to their communities and make changes. Men, I'm pretty sure many men were much better toward their wives, children, and families. They were better as far as dealing in the community and trying to make a change and better themselves. Some people ran for office, such as Barack Obama, who was there. Barack Obama, by the way, lives in the same neighborhood as Minister Farrakhan. They vote in the same precinct. You didn't know that, did you?
No.
Yes. Also, you had many people, again, open up businesses and do other things that you may not know about. They went and got their college education, or they registered to vote. There was an impact. It was probably not as much as you look at it 25 years later. It seems like, you know, what was the impact? Where are we? But you got to realize that after the people, and I want to say the devil, saw the success of that march and that demonstration, they used all their powers to try to cause that, you know, to kind of discourage people from coming together and actually acting on it. You know, the forces came against it. Again, the media it was almost a media blackout. Can you imagine? But what happened on that day, it was no plan for the TV to cover it or the newspaper to cover it. They were forced to do it. CNN and C-SPAN were forced to cover it. They covered it wall to wall on TV that whole day. Because I told you, I got there maybe, 7 o'clock in the morning? Mm-hmm. The broadcast didn't end until like 5 p.m. So just think about that, 8+ hours of broadcast, and they were forced to show it. They could not ignore it. And believe me, America, they can act stupid if they want to. Europe, Asia, Africa, the Arab world, they saw.
Why do you believe that not too many people know about the march? Like, why? Like, what do you think it's because, like I mean, American society is so, drenched in white supremacy and wanting to, I mean, there's just so much history of conspiracy against marginalized communities
Yeah,
throughout, American history. So, do you think it was just a continuation of that?
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of glad you said that. I just made this note because yesterday I re-listened to some of it again, and a big statement that Mr. Farrakhan made was, and I think I wrote it down, but I know this: white supremacy has to die in order for humanity to live. White supremacy has to die in order for humanity to live. And as you know, the subject of white supremacy has really been augmented and highlighted due to the political situation the last 4 years. Now, it's been going on all the time. I mean, this is old half of black people. We know about this stuff because we're living it. But because of the recent events, especially with the advent of George Floyd and the videotape beatings or killings of especially unarmed black people, Breonna Taylor, people like that. This, which has been happening all the time, but now it's getting more widespread coverage. And now it's gotten to the point where there's a level of outrage where people are really starting to move against it to another level. So, but that's what that is. But yes, I mean, obviously, the people who control the media, for the most part, are participants in white supremacy, and they promote it. Doesn't matter what political party, what organization, white supremacy is at the basis of just about all of them.
Fair enough, fair enough. Do you think, though, do you find or do you feel at all like there are any news organizations that are making strides to correct that? Because I noticed some news organizations are still very heavily participating in that kind of thinking, but it seems like there are other news organizations where it seems at least that there is more of an attempt to cover many different stories. Like I feel like Vice News does quite a great job at covering so many different stories, and it feels authentic. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are. I mean, and even the ones that I guess are notorious for not being fair or what have you. In some cases, now, because of the advent of people with cell phones and smartphones that can document this, just think, we would not have seen what happened to George Floyd if it wasn't for this teenage black girl with a smartphone that had the audacity, had the courage, and had the backing of Almighty God to stand there and videotape that for the world to see.
Mm-hmm.
And that one incident, that George Floyd, has really caused a ripple effect and earthquake throughout the entire globe.
Yeah.
And there are some people of all faiths, persuasions, ethnic groups, skin color, wherever you are in the world, that have come to a point where they are not going to be going back.
Mm-hmm.
They have no desire that we're not going to go back to Bull Connor, what happened with the sicking the dogs and the police brutality. That's why you're hearing all this rising up in various areas of the country and of the world against, the wrong behavior by elected officials and the law enforcement and the military or what have you.
How are you feeling about the change in presidency? Do you think is more promising now that we do have our first, Black female South Asian vice president.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
I would say that from where I stand, it really didn't bother me or matter to me who won the election, because I think whatever goes on is in the hands of God or is by his permission, whatever it is. I believe Donald Trump, and I know people hate to hear this, but Donald Trump was put in there by God. He was allowed to sit there and be there and do what he did and is doing by the permission of God. And one thing I'll just say, just as a personal note, I like to thank Mr. Trump for helping to reveal the real true face of America. When Donald Trump came out, he's allowed the people in the different areas of the country that have these white supremacist feelings, or anti-poor, anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican, anti-Asian, what have you. They were given license to express that in a more amenable environment,
Yeah.
So I'm thankful to Mr. Trump for that. And again, as I was saying before, you can't put all the white supremacy blame on people that call themselves Republicans, because especially in the city of Chicago, the Democrats are the ones who have oppressed and killed Black people here in this city. And I can tell you, because I've been here all my life.
Somewhere recently where it said like representation is not liberation in politics. And I feel like I'm, on the one hand, yes, that's true. But on the other hand, I still think that it's it's a big deal that we are having representation now. It's a step in the right direction, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. One thing that I guess is going on now especially here in Chicago, among some of us, I would say a good portion of us, that we remember when we were able to elect Barack Obama as president. We had such high hopes and expectations for things to change for the better for us here in Chicago, but that didn't happen. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Barack Obama left Chicago, went to Washington, D.C., and left the Black folks here to die. He was the one he didn't go against Richard Daley. He actually supported and endorsed Rahm Emanuel, who was murderous against Black people here. I don't know if you remember what happened to Laquan McDonald.
Yes.
There was a that video cover-up. He was involved in that. That was one of the main reasons why he didn't run again.
Yeah.
Because he know behind what he did with Laquan McDonald, Black people wasn't going to have it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he didn't run again. People of color or Black people in these positions, but nothing is being brought home really of significance to better our condition here in this city. Most of them are cowards. They won't stand up to the governor. They wouldn't stand up to this devil Mike Madigan. So, they're Black. They got Black skin, but I mean, they're of no use to us being their representatives.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel, or who do you feel most represented by, politically, socially?
I know for the presidential, me personally, I was going for Bernie Sanders. Myself. There's not too much of anybody that represents me here locally. Now, like the Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Yeah.
Love her. These are the kind of people I like. Ayanna Pressley, the people that they call the squad. Ilhan Omar. These are the type of people that I would more say more in line with what I, would want to have representing me.
Mm-hmm.
But what mostly what we have here again is basically sellouts, cowards, and turncoats and all that.
Mm-hmm. For my last question, I wanted to ask you, because recently, I think one of my old teachers recently said that this is the most that we have collectively talked about race issues since like the 60s.
Yeah.
And being with the Nation of Islam and working with them side by side, politically, how do you feel from your perspective, from your experiences, how do you feel about now, this resurgence of the importance of speaking about race? How much hope do you have and faith?
I think it's very important. I do think that the time has come. America has come to a real crossroads this time. This is really, as somebody was saying, it's not the 11th hour, it's the hour. I mean, the time is now. These things that have been going on for this 460 something years, that is going to have to be resolved. And there's going to be a critical mass of people who are going to make sure that happens and go against any force or any body, any organization, any whatever that's trying to impede that. But one thing I want to just say again about the Million Man March, that the main theme of the Million Man March was, a subtitle was, A More Perfect Union. A more perfect union is a phrase that came out of the American Constitution.
Mm.
If you look that up, we work together for a more perfect union.
Right.
And in that speech, in that lecture, was one minister's address, he addressed atonement. Atonement was one of the steps toward that more perfect union. Matter of fact, he said atonement was actually the fifth stage of the fifth step toward a more perfect union. I just go through what they are. The first stage is pointing out the wrong. Somebody has to point out what's wrong, because it can never be corrected if you don't know what's wrong. Somebody has to actually, you go to a doctor to get a diagnosis.
Right.
And to determine what's wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, you may not like what the doctor says, you may have attitude toward him or her, but somebody needs to point out the wrong. Mm-hmm. The next stage, stage two, is the acknowledgement of the wrong, recognition, or the admittance that it was wrong, or I did wrong, or that was wrong. After somebody pointed out, you say, okay, I acknowledge, yes, that was wrong. Mm-hmm. Number three is confession. Confession to who? Confession to God, number one, and confession in some way to the person who was wrong. If you did somebody wrong, you've not only confessed to God, but confess to that person, yet, brother, sister, or person, I did wrong. I have, and what that does is kind of relieve some guilt, I believe, in that process by that confession. After the confession is repentance. Now, the repentance comes with a feeling of remorse, or regret, contrition for what you have done wrong, and you've acknowledged it, and you confessed it, and you feel bad, you feel remorse about that. And then after you've gone through those stages, then you come to number 5, where you have to do something about it. And that doing something about it is atonement. Mm-hmm. And in the atonement, you're making amends or reparation or restitution for what was done wrong in this case, in this particular case. That's where the atonement comes in. I believe that there was a reference to atonement being related to one of the Jewish traditions, or I don't know if it was Rosh Hashanah or one of those that has to do with atonement. Yeah, you may know what that is.
Yeah, Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, that's what Yom Kippur, right? Number 6, after you've atoned, you've done something about it, you've make some amends, then forgiveness can come after that. And it's not just with lips, but with the heart. You can get real forgiveness. After that, the 7th stage is reconciliation. Reconciliation, if there's any hostility, that's been quelled, and now it's a harmonious situation. And then after reconciliation, that can't stop there, but that's the last step before you get to the perfect union. And the perfect union is no differences that can't be healed, no problems that can't be solved. The wounded have been made whole. And so that's what the reference is to the perfect union. And America, over this past hundreds of years, have been working toward that. Mm-hmm. And I am hopeful that we're very close to achieving that perfect union. At least, well, it wasn't so much a perfect union, it was a more perfect union. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it wasn't perfect, it was perfect for that stage of development. Yeah. But as time is going on, circumstances has changed, so that perfection needs to change with it based on, the developments of things that have happened. The Million Man March, like I said, it was a whole day of events there. Famous people spoke, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Al Sampson, the great Rosa Parks spoke, Maya Angelou, Dorothy Height of the Negro Women's Organization, Dr. Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm X, she spoke. Wow. So there were some prominent women there that spoke. And again, there was a lot of prominent people who did not speak. Like I said, Barack Obama was there, and definitely, as you can see, the results of what happened with him. And I definitely would attribute that to a lot in part of what he saw at the Million Man March.